You all know the basic premise of the lawsuit. Dan Hartman, follow him on Twitter. It's Answers for Shawn, at Answers4Shawn. His son, Shawn Hartman, died 33 days after his first Pfizer shot. He was 17 at the time. He got it so that he could play hockey. He got it, not that it really changes anything, but it adds to the devastation of the father. He got it without the dad's permission, unbeknownst to his dad. And unbeknownst to his dad, he got very sick. Shawn got very sick right after the shot. A few days after the shot, went to the hospital, orange bags under his eyes. He gets to the hospital. They don't do anything in terms of any meaningful testing. They give him an aspirin and they say, go home. They don't do a troponin test. They don't do a D-dimer test, even though they knew that the kid had recently gotten the jab, because one of the notes on the doctor's note said either D-dimer or troponin test, or it noted that he had received the shot, within temporal proximity of his hospitalization. They didn't do those tests. Those tests would have revealed either a clot or myocarditis. They measure things that would have indicated a potential clot, potential myocarditis. I forget exactly, like proteins in the blood. The tests are D-dimer and troponin, Troponin. They didn't do it. Kid sort of feels better, although he wasn't feeling better for any period of time. And father comes in, son is dead on the ground 33 days later. They filed a vaccine injury support program compensation claim in Canada, because we have that thing. It's called the VISP, VISP. It's been 4 years. They don't have an answer. It's been 2 years since they filed the appeal. They don't have an answer. And there's a very thoroughly corrupt reason for which they don't have an answer, in my humble opinion: speculation. And that is so that there's no definitive, concrete confirmation by the government of Canada that the Pfizer jab killed Shawn Hartman. If they were to acknowledge that, it would be an exhibit, a piece of evidence, at least answering the causality link in the lawsuit, which now has been filed against Pfizer and the government of Canada. The lawsuit is seeking damages from Pfizer, misrepresentations, defective product, failure to adequately warn, and they sued the government as well. Dan sued the government as well. That suit was dismissed on, I don't know if it would say sovereign immunity. They have their pending lawsuit against Pfizer. They're seeking damages. They're saying that the product was unfit for its intended purpose. There was fraudulent misrepresentation, failure to adequately warn, et cetera, et cetera. They had been waiting for Pfizer's defense, and Pfizer recently filed their defense. And it's standard, what you'd think it would be. It's a long document. Talks about how they had basically emergency use authorization or something along those lines. It's a different concept in Canada. They were commissioned by the government to come up with a vaccine. They did their trials, massive trials, and they brought it to market. The manufacturing, when they scaled up the manufacturing, was still done according to the rules of the art, and what they delivered was, effectively the same as what was authorized, despite the scaling up of manufacturing. We'll get to that in a second. And I'll read my tweet on this. I've just basically, I'm going to include the absolute necessary highlights of this lawsuit, which I think are the most damning. Read through Pfizer's defense to Answers for Shawn's lawsuit for damages. Dan is suing Pfizer for damages resulting from the death of his son, Shawn, 30 days after having received the Pfizer shot. I cannot deny my own bias. I believe Pfizer executives and Albert Bourla in particular belong in jail. Do not pass go. Do not collect $50 billion. Jail. That said, I do notice a couple of rather incriminating admissions in the defense. The first is that Pfizer now admits to having received signals of myocarditis and pericarditis, particularly in young men, as early as June 2021. The implication is that no such signals were discovered during the trials, although based on my knowledge of the trials, I suspect any such signals were buried, as Maddie DeGarry's injury during the trials was also buried, so Pfizer could get approval. Remember, I had Maddie DeGarry's parents on. She was rendered basically paraplegic, quadriplegic, transverse myelitis. And that was in the trials. And then they just wrote it off as, they called it a functional bellyache or something along those lines. And they wrote her out of the trials so that injury didn't factor into the 400 kids that were in the trials. And so they could say they have clean trials and it's fit for kids. The fraudulent, totally corrupt Pfizer trials is the basis of I.M. Brooke Jackson's key TAM fraud lawsuit against Pfizer. We all know this. Which lawsuit Biden's corrupt regime dismissed, and which corrupt dismissal is currently being still being pursued by Attorney General Pam Bondi, a woman who served as counsel for Pfizer in 2021. So they knew the shot was causing myocarditis and pericarditis, particularly in young men, and they think their defense is that they updated the warning label in the product. I'm going to show you this. And that the myocarditis and pericarditis was worse from the COVID infection in any event. An infection with the shot didn't prevent in any event. Total and utter horse crap. At least they now have formally admitted in legal proceedings that they were aware of these signals as of at least June 2021 and did not act on them. Pfizer denies causality, which explains why the corrupt terrorist government of Canada has yet to adjudicate on Shawn's vaccine injury support program claim. Because the corrupt pieces of human filth at the government have not yet acknowledged Shawn's death as vaccine-related, it allows Pfizer to argue that there is no causal link. All criminals to the core. The other interesting thing is the manufacturing process, which they say was normal, scaling up. Okay. So this is paragraph 47. Paragraph 46, page 12. The product Monograph and other information disseminated by Pfizer Canada in relation to the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine have included updated and timely information on potential adverse events and updated information and warnings related to the use of Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine. As early as June 30, 2021, the product Monograph stated as follows under the heading, quote, warning and precautions. Very rare cases of myocarditis and pericarditis. What's rare? 1 in 5,000 per shot? Did they tell you the rarity of the prevalence? They sure as hell didn't. Very rare cases of myocarditis and or pericarditis following vaccination with Pfizer-BioNTech have been reported during post-authorization use. Post-authorization use. They authorized it before they had adequate signals to be sure that you wouldn't have post-authorization signals of myocarditis and pericarditis. These cases occurred more commonly after the second dose and in adolescents and young adults. Typically, the onset of symptoms has been within a few days following receipt of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine. Available short-term follow-up data suggests that the symptoms resolve in most individuals, but information on long-term sequelae is lacking. The decision to administer the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine to an individual with a history of myocarditis and pericarditis should take into account the individual's clinical circumstances. Healthcare professionals are advised to consider the possibility of myocarditis and or pericarditis in their differential diagnosis if individuals present with chest pain, shortness of breath, palpitations, or other signs and symptoms of myocarditis and or pericarditis following immunization with a COVID-19 vaccine. This could allow for early diagnosis and treatment. Cardiology consultation for management and follow-up should be considered. Notwithstanding the very rare cases, this is paragraph 48. Following vaccinations that were reported during the post-authorization use, Health Canada has continued to find that the benefits of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine outweigh the risks. As stated above, the Pfizer vaccine has continuously remained authorized by Health Canada for use by individuals 16 years or older since December 20. Do you understand what they're doing here? Well, they're doing what basically criminal gangs do, sort of like the opposite of the questioning the criminal. Well, your friend's going to tell on you, so you better tell me first. What they're basically saying is they authorized it, so it couldn't have been illegal, and we didn't do anything wrong, because if they thought it was dangerous, they would have removed our authorization to use it. They go on to say, incidentally, contrary to the allegations of the amended claim, Pfizer defendants deny the very rare case of myocarditis and pericarditis following vaccination. Contrary to the allegations in the amended claim, the Pfizer defendants deny that the very rare cases of myocarditis and pericarditis following vaccination were caused by any negligent design. No, it was just caused by the design, manufacturer, or other tortious act of the defendants. In any event, the risk of the developing myocarditis and the risk of hospitalization, admission, and death from myocarditis is significantly higher after COVID-19 than from the COVID-19 vaccination. And then they go on to say, I think that they said also that he also got the shot after we updated the monograph. So it's not our fault. I mean, he just had to, hope that the pharmacist or whoever the hell administered it took it up, opened it, and brought it to his attention. Oh, here. In any event, as early as June 30, 2021, the warnings and precautions section of the product monograph referenced the very rare cases of myocarditis. You see, they have to use the word, the very rare cases of myocarditis. Hey, assholes. What was the prevalence then? Was it 1 in 5,000? Is that what you call very rare? But they got it. They're going to define it. That's like their defined term. Very rare cases of myocarditis and or pericarditis following vaccination had been reported. This was 2 months before it is alleged that Shawn Hartman received a dose of the Pfizer. Oh, so 2 months earlier, he got it. And then this is going back to the manufacturing. They say, while clinical trial was still underway, Pfizer and BioNTech continuously considered improvements to the downstream manufacturing process for Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. Adjustments to the manufacturing process during drug development are routine and are common when scalability is an important issue. There was nothing exceptional or improper about the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine manufacturing adjustments over time. It's like, it's like the episode of The Simpsons where they're trying to figure out another name for a tax. It's like, well, how would you call it? A colossal cash grab? It's like, well, you see, that's a problem. We don't want to call it that. Oh, call it a temporary credit adjustment. So we adjusted our manufacturing processes so that we could manufacture and produce at scale. But don't worry, the product we delivered was the product that was authorized, when that is specifically part of the bait and switch that many people are arguing, that what Pfizer delivered was not what was authorized, and that the production was shit, that they had hot batches, which they clearly did, and that what they delivered was not covered by, in Canada, the hold harmless provisions of their supply agreements, and in America, that it wouldn't have been covered by emergency use protection. So that's the lawsuit. And they made a couple of damning admissions, and now they've opened themselves up to discovery. I'd like to know, hey, what was the prevalence that you were reporting at the time? Those signals, post-authorization use signals of myocarditis and pericarditis, why didn't they come up during the trials? Oh, because you didn't try enough kids? Or because you fraudulently wrote off adverse events during the trials so that you could get it approved, so that you could rake in $50 billion at the expense of human lives. Jail. Pfizer should pay the largest criminal and civil settlement in the history of corporate America and Canada, taking over their old record from 2009. And Albert Bourla should enjoy the rest of his life in jail. And all the other executives who are responsible for pushing through this garbage, covering up the adverse events, the negative signals, lying over and over and over again, simply so that they can make a few extra $1 billion. Jail. That's all I have to say about that.